And you just hit one point there, and you said we need to submit to each other, and we need to come together to be honest to each other. Now, pastors have troubles, and some of them, they've got these things they know I'm not all right, but they do not know how to go and relate to another pastor, or they do not know how to express to what they're going through. I'm talking about genuine pastors, maybe, that are going through trouble. Sometimes they feel themselves like also manipulated. I heard of one pastor that said, I am like also abused. And the reason for why I went doing these all things because I'm not supported, I'm not blessed, and my church is not blessing me. Reason for what I went in these all things there to make myself, to get what I can get, at least to survive. And others, because of powers, and they want to have miracles because that church is doing this miracle and I'm not doing it, let me also do it. So they get involved in different things. But at the end of the road, they come back and they say, look, I would like to confess, I would like to stand, but they don't know how to do it. Is there any wisdom? Is there anything we can do? Can pastor voice also their concern? Can pastor, and how do they do that? It seems to be very difficult to some of the pastors. I would like really to, what do you say about that?
Yeah, look, so doctor, it's a very tricky thing, right? Because again, I'll go back to Paul, and I guess we'll speak a lot about Paul, because if you look at the life of Paul, God called him not just for the mission to go and preach the gospel, but to use his life, I believe, as a template for how ministry should be done. Apart from Jesus, of course, right? But he used a regular man like you and I that did not even serve the Lord, but got convicted, got found the Lord Jesus on the road to Damascus, got converted. And then he went on this journey to discover Jesus, right? And to live out his apostolic calling. And so Paul makes an interesting statement. He, at one point, he's defending his apostleship. And he says, that he's not inferior to all of these other so-called apostles. We call them super apostles. They come through and they want to be called to be apostles. And they demand things from the church. He says, I'm not inferior to any of those men. But one thing I did not do, and maybe I should have, because Paul is now trying to teach the church something. He says, listen, I've done everything that you see these men do. I've done more, right? But there's one thing perhaps I left out not to do, and maybe it's my shame. He said, I did not, and I'll paraphrase, right? He says, I did not force you to support me in the ministry or to give to me.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is what is powerful, doctor. And I think, again, he says, although I had that right, I did not take up that right. And then he says something powerful. He says, so that I will not hinder the preaching of the gospel.
Exactly.
So if we have to follow a pattern of ministry, Paul says this to Timothy. He says, follow me as I follow Christ. Follow my example. I think, doctor, I mean, this is much deeper. The problem is, right, is that you know this as well as I do, right? And recently I had another experience in Kenya, but there are lots of people that they go into ministry because there's nothing else for them to do, or they can't find a job or something, and because you see, every believer is able to teach. Every believer is able to pray for somebody. Every believer can do these things, right? And if you're a little bit more charismatic, you can quickly build yourself a church, but you might not be called to be a pastor or a church. And then the moment that happens, you get into the area of you've usurped authority. You've taken authority that is not yours. And then to keep this thing going, you need to start manipulating people. That's the only way. That's the only way.
That's very interesting. Now you touch